The galaxy was vast, filled with countless stars, ancient civilizations, and empires that had existed for thousands of years. Among them, humanity was still considered young. They had only recently spread beyond their homeworld Earth, building colonies on distant planets and establishing trade with their neighbors. To many species, humans were curious, but unimportant. They had passion, determination, and a reckless courage, but their technology was not considered special. Their ships were older, heavier, and less advanced than the sleek designs of the great empires. When humans sent representatives to the Galactic Council, they were often greeted with polite smiles but quiet laughter behind their backs. In council chambers, whispers always followed their footsteps. "Humans are still children," one alien ambassador sneered. "They cling to old designs. Their warships are obsolete relics," another said. It became a common joke among the stars. Whenever the council debated military matters, someone would mention humanity's fleets, and the chamber would echo with laughter. The humans themselves never argued. They only listened quietly as if the insults did not matter. But silence has its own weight, and humanity's silence carried more meaning than the council understood. Humanity had fought many wars before they ever joined the stars. Their history was carved from struggle. On Earth, they had survived famine, disease, endless conflicts, and disasters that could have ended them. They had built empires, seen them fall and risen again from the ashes. Every scar of history taught them one thing: survival was never guaranteed. Survival had to be earned. So while other empires chased beauty in design and efficiency in numbers, humanity built differently. They created ships that could endure punishment, warships that were not elegant but strong, carriers that could unleash endless fighters, dreadnoughts that looked like floating fortresses. To outsiders, these ships looked old-fashioned, even primitive, but to humans they were shields against extinction. The galaxy, however, only saw weakness. The rumors spread like wildfire. Traders carried stories of human fleets made of iron and steel, ships that looked like they belonged in museums. Mercenaries mocked them, saying they would never last in a real war against a modern empire. The media networks of alien worlds broadcast jokes about the human antiques. Even children of other races grew up laughing at pictures of the blocky, massive vessels. Yet humanity never explained. They never defended themselves. They smiled, they shrugged, and they allowed the galaxy to believe the lie. Because deep within the hearts of humans, there was an unspoken truth. If the day ever came when they had to fight, the galaxy would learn what obsolete truly meant. One young alien reporter once asked a human captain during an interview, "Why do you keep these old ships? Why not build new ones like the rest of us?" The captain, an older man with gray at his temples, only smiled. His eyes carried a weight that the young alien did not understand. "Because sometimes," he said softly, "the old ways are the ones that save you." The answer was mocked across the stars, but the captain never cared. Back on Earth, in hidden shipyards orbiting the moon and in the dark docks of Mars, the truth rested silently. Thousands upon thousands of warships slept in orbit, lined in endless rows. Some were scarred from old battles, others freshly built but designed in the same rugged style. They were not showpieces for display. They were tools of war, preserved for one purpose only: to defend humanity when the storm came. And though the galaxy laughed, humanity remembered its history. They remembered how quickly peace could vanish, how easily arrogance could blind, and how deadly enemies could become when they smelled weakness. The rumors continued to spread. The jokes grew louder, but somewhere deep in the human heart there was no anger, only patience. For humanity knew something the galaxy had forgotten: every empire falls when it grows too comfortable. But the ones who survive are those who are ready for the day no one believes will come. And so humanity waited, silent in the council halls, enduring the mockery. They carried their burden with quiet strength, hiding the truth of their fleets, waiting for the day destiny would call them. That day was closer than anyone imagined. For years, the galaxy laughed at humans and their so-called obsolete fleet. But mocking words have a way of feeding arrogance, and arrogance soon gave birth to cruelty. The Threx Dominion, one of the strongest empires in the galaxy, grew restless. They were a warrior species, proud and merciless. Their fleets were modern, sleek, and feared across the stars. For them, Conquering weaker civilizations was nothing more than a sport, and to them humanity looked like an easy prey. They studied the humans for years. They saw colonies scattered across distant worlds, defended only by those rusted war machines. They saw humans trading peacefully, smiling, making friends, and avoiding conflict. And to the Threx, that smile was weakness, so they chose their target, Helios III, a bright and thriving human colony world. Helios III was known for its golden plains and twin suns. Families had built cities there, children played in wide-open fields, and farmers cultivated food that fed millions. It was a world of hope, one of humanity's proudest colonies. The Threx Dominion came without warning. Their fleet arrived like a storm, blotting out the stars with their warships. Cities screamed as fire rained from the skies. The humans fought bravely, launching local defense fleets and planetary guns, but against the Threx armada, they were hopelessly outmatched. Within days, Helios III burned. Towers crumbled, farmland turned to ash, and entire families fled into underground shelters. Millions were left homeless. Thousands were killed. The galaxy watched in silence. Some pitied humanity, but most shook their heads. This is what happens when you rely on old ships, the council said. They should have modernized. They should have listened. No one expected humanity to fight back, but humanity did not kneel. When news reached Earth and Mars, grief turned into fury. The faces of children covered in ash and parents crying in broken streets were shown across every human world. Anger spread like wildfire. Politicians swore revenge. Soldiers clenched their fists, ready to march into battle. And then came the message, the one that silenced every laugh, every insult, every whisper across the galaxy. A human representative stood before the Galactic Council. He was calm, but his voice carried a steel edge. His words echoed in every chamber, in every broadcast. "You wish to see our strength," he said. "Now you will." The council chamber fell into silence. No one laughed this time. No one mocked. For the first time, they felt something else in the human's voice, something colder, something heavier. The Threx Dominion laughed when they heard the message. To them, it was a final act of pride from a species too weak to understand reality. They boasted to their allies that they would crush humanity in days. They promised to make Earth itself burn. But they had made a grave mistake. Back in human space, the sleeping giants began to wake. Shipyards across Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies lit up with energy. Docks that had been quiet for decades roared to life. Alarms sounded as crews boarded warships older than some empires, but still mighty, still armed, still hungry for battle. Across the void, fleets gathered. Not one or two, not 100 or 1,000, but hundreds of thousands. Ancient carriers, their hulls scarred from forgotten wars, rose from their slumber. Dreadnoughts the size of floating cities turned their guns toward the stars. Cruisers and destroyers lined up in endless formations. The galaxy had always mocked humanity for clinging to the past. But now the past rose like a tidal wave, and its roar shook the stars. For the people of Helios III, the sight of the gathering armada brought tears to their eyes. Survivors looked to the sky, whispering prayers, knowing that their suffering had not been forgotten. Humanity was coming, not with words of apology, but with fire, steel, and vengeance. The Threx Dominion had believed they attacked a weak prey. But in truth, they had awakened a sleeping predator, and soon the galaxy would understand the cost of mistaking silence for weakness. The storm was coming. The galaxy did not believe the humans at first. Many thought their words were empty threats, born from anger and grief. After all, what could a species with obsolete ships do against a modern empire like the Threx Dominion? But then the movement began. From every human colony, from hidden docks, from silent shipyards orbiting barren moons, the old warships stirred. In the darkness of space above Mars, massive docking clamps released ancient carriers. Their hulls bore scars from long-forgotten battles, but their engines roared to life with renewed fury. On Earth's moon, forgotten shipyards opened their gates, releasing dreadnoughts as large as floating fortresses. On the icy worlds of Jupiter's moons, destroyers and cruisers lifted from their frozen cradles, their railguns glowing as they powered up. The galaxy watched in disbelief. What they had thought were graveyards of rust were not abandoned relics at all. They were preserved, maintained, waiting. Humans had hidden their strength in plain sight, disguised as weakness. Each day the numbers grew. First came a few thousand, then tens of thousands, then more. Soon entire sectors of space were filled with human warships lined in endless formations. Their shadows swallowed the stars behind them. The ships were not sleek. They were not beautiful. Some were bulky, some looked rough and scarred, others seemed patched with heavy armor plates. But what they lacked in beauty, they carried in sheer presence. They were iron giants, each designed with one purpose: survival through fire and death. On the bridge of the flagship Eternal Resolve, Admiral Kara Holt stood tall, her hands resting on the command rail. She gazed at the fleet reports flashing before her eyes. Hundreds of thousands of ships already, all waiting for her command. Obsolete, she whispered with a bitter smile. Let them call us that. When we move, the galaxy will remember our name. Across the galaxy, the alien empires watched in stunned silence. Sensor reports streamed into their councils showing human fleets assembling like no one had ever seen. A reptilian commander from the Vex coalition muttered, "This is impossible. How can such a young species field such numbers?" A council member from the Sci-FI Alliance whispered, "They kept them hidden. All these years." For the first time, the laughter stopped. But among the Threx Dominion there was still arrogance. Their generals mocked the human fleet as nothing more than a pile of junk. "Numbers mean nothing," one general sneered. "Their ships will fall apart the moment real firepower touches them." "Let them come," another said. "We will scatter their antiques across the stars." They believed in their modern weapons, their energy shields, their sleek designs. They could not imagine that these massive armored beasts could hold their ground. But the humans were not preparing for a duel of technology. They were preparing for a storm of destruction. On the colonies, ordinary humans watched the broadcasts with tears in their eyes. Fathers hugged their children. Mothers whispered promises of safety, and veterans saluted the screens as the old ships rose into formation. Survivors from Helios III watched with burning hope. They had lost their homes, but now they would see vengeance rise in the skies. One child, standing in the rubble of Helios III, pointed at the hologram of the fleet and said, "They are coming for us, aren't they?" Her mother knelt down, holding her close, and whispered through tears, "Yes, my love. Humanity never forgets its own." The gathering of ships became something greater than war. It became a statement. It was proof that humanity's silence had never been weakness. It had been patience. A patience that had now ended. The fleet stood ready. Engines burned. Weapons powered up. Across the stars, the humans had only one voice. One unshakable will. To defend their people and remind the galaxy that they were not prey. The time had come to reveal the strength behind the word obsolete. And as the last ship joined the armada, the order spread through every channel, set course for Threx space. The human fleet moved like a tidal wave, endless rows of ships cutting across the darkness. To those who saw them, it was as if the stars themselves had vanished, replaced by steel and fire. The engines of carriers, dreadnoughts, and cruisers lit up space like a second sun. Humanity had spoken through action. The storm had begun. The Threx Dominion met them with confidence. Their fleet was sleek and shining, armed with the most advanced weapons the galaxy had ever seen. Thousands of warships formed perfect lines, their commanders laughing as they saw the rusted antiques approaching. To them, it was not a battle, it was an execution. "End them quickly," the Threx commander growled from the bridge of his flagship. "Let the galaxy see how foolish humans truly are." The fleets closed in. Silence fell across every human ship. Soldiers tightened their grips on weapons. Pilots adjusted helmets and whispered quiet prayers. Captains stared at their screens, waiting for the moment of truth. Then the order came. Fire. The void erupted. Railguns thundered, unleashing slugs of solid metal that screamed across the battlefield. Missiles poured from human launch bays, trails of fire cutting the blackness. Fighters swarmed out of carriers, not in dozens but in thousands, flooding the stars like angry hornets. The Threx fleet answered with their own storm. Energy beams carved across the void, bright lances of light slicing into human ships. Shields flared, explosions bloomed, and the darkness filled with the chaos of war. At first, the Threx laughed. Their weapons pierced human armor. They saw destroyers shatter and carriers stagger under the weight of advanced plasma fire. But then something unexpected happened. The human ships did not break. They endured. Where one ship fell, another took its place. Where shields failed, thick layers of armor absorbed the blow. Ancient dreadnoughts pressed forward even as fire tore at their hulls. Railguns answered beam weapons with brutal force, punching holes through Threx shields and tearing ships apart. On the bridge of the Eternal Resolve, Admiral Kara Holt stood unmoving as her fleet pressed onward. Her eyes burned with determination. "They think us weak," she said softly. "Show them who we are." The battlefield turned into a storm of destruction. Human fighters darted through gaps in Threx formations, dropping payloads that tore apart cruisers. Missiles struck in waves, overwhelming defenses and smashing into carriers. Railgun salvos shattered entire squadrons of sleek ships. For every human lost, the Threx lost 5. For every scar cut into human armor, a dozen alien ships exploded in fire. The galaxy, watching through long-range sensors and broadcasts, could not believe their eyes. Species across the stars stared in silence as humanity's obsolete fleet tore through the most powerful empire in the quadrant. An alien council member whispered in awe, This is not weakness. This is survival made into steel." The Threx commanders felt fear for the first time. Their formations broke as human dreadnoughts drove straight through them like predators among prey. Their sleek ships, designed for fast duels and quick victories, could not stand against the sheer endurance of human war machines. A Threx captain screamed over comms, "They are not falling! They are not falling!" Moments later, his ship was torn apart by a barrage of missiles. But for humanity, this was not just a battle. It was justice. On Helios III, survivors huddled in shelters as they listened to news broadcasts. When they heard that the Threx were being driven back, tears filled their eyes. Mothers hugged their children, whispering, "We are safe. They are protecting us." For the soldiers fighting in space, every shot carried the weight of their people's grief, their rage, and their hope. They did not fight only for victory. They fought for every life stolen on Helios III. The clash raged on for hours, the void filled with fire, wreckage, and the screams of dying ships. But as the smoke cleared and the fleets drifted apart, one truth became undeniable. Humanity had not brought an obsolete fleet. They had brought a storm that no empire was prepared for, and the Threx dominion, once so proud, now tasted fear. The first clash was over. The war for humanity's survival had only just begun. The battle between humanity and the Threx dominion was not just a fight in the void, it became a spectacle. Across the galaxy, sensor feeds carried images of the clash. News networks translated every explosion into breaking headlines. Leaders, soldiers, and civilians from dozens of empires turned their eyes to one battlefield. And what they saw changed everything. At first, most viewers expected the humans to lose. The Threx dominion had always been feared, their fleets undefeated in countless wars. Against them, the humans had brought bulky, old-looking ships, war machines the galaxy had already dismissed as useless. But as the hours passed, the truth became impossible to deny. Alien citizens watched in silence as human dreadnoughts pushed through wave after wave of enemy fire. They saw carriers unleash endless swarms of fighters, each one fighting with reckless courage. They saw railgun shells cut through Threx shields like blades through glass. The sleek modern Threx fleet was breaking, and the so-called obsolete human fleet was standing strong. In the chambers of the Galactic Council, the mood shifted from mocking laughter to stunned silence. Screens filled with images of burning Threx ships, their debris scattering like falling stars. Admirals of other species leaned forward in disbelief. A counselor from the Zorathi Alliance whispered, "How is this possible? Those ships, they are centuries old." An elder from the Kravim Republic replied, her voice trembling, "Old, yes, but not weak. They are forged for survival, not beauty." For the first time in history, the galaxy was not laughing at humanity. They were watching with awe and with fear. On the bridge of the Eternal Resolve, Admiral Kara Holt read the incoming transmissions. She knew the galaxy was watching. She knew every move of her fleet was being recorded and analyzed by eyes across the stars. Her voice was calm but carried iron. "Then let them see. Let them see that humans do not kneel. Let them understand why we build the way we do." Her words were echoed by every captain, every soldier, every pilot. Humanity was not just fighting for victory. They were fighting to prove their place among the stars. Meanwhile, the Threx Dominion's arrogance was crumbling. Commanders who once mocked humans now screamed in panic. Their ships were being torn apart, their formations broken, their fleets scattered like dust in the wind. A Threx general slammed his claws against the control table. "Impossible. These are antiques. They cannot withstand us." But even as he spoke, another explosion shook his fleet, and his own flagship shuddered under human fire. The Dominion once feared was bleeding, and the galaxy saw it happen. Across human colonies, hope began to bloom. Survivors of Helios III listened to the broadcasts, their hearts lifting with every report of a Threx ship destroyed. On Earth, people filled the streets cheering as images of the battle reached them. Children waved flags, families embraced, and old veterans saluted the screens with tears in their eyes. One old man, a retired soldier, whispered to his grandson, "Do you see now? This is why we never let go of our ships. This is why we remember. Because the day always comes when we must rise." The galaxy began to ask questions. Why had humans kept such a massive fleet? Why had they hidden it for so long? Why had they endured the mocking without answering? And the answer slowly became clear. Humanity had always known. They had always remembered the cost of unpreparedness. While other empires trusted in treaties and shields and illusions of safety, humanity had prepared for the storm. Now the storm had come, and they were the only ones strong enough to face it. As the Threx Dominion staggered, as the galaxy stared in shock, one truth echoed louder than any weapon fired that day. Humanity's fleet was not obsolete. It was unstoppable. And for the first time, the galaxy understood that the quiet species they had mocked for so long carried within them the power of survival and the will to never surrender. The Threx Dominion had entered the battle with arrogance. They believed their modern fleets, with polished weapons and shining shields, would crush humanity in a matter of hours. But hours had passed, and the truth became impossible to deny. The tide was turning. Human ships pressed forward with relentless force. Where one was destroyed, 3 more surged into its place. Carriers unleashed wave after wave of fighters, filling the sky with burning trails. Dreadnoughts, battered and scarred, refused to fall, their railguns thundering again and again. The Threx commanders grew desperate. "Target their carriers! Break their lines!" they screamed across comms. But every attempt was met with brutal resistance. Human ships moved with precision, covering one another, fighting not as individuals but as one great living army. And behind every volley of missiles, behind every railgun shot, there was something the Threx could not match: human will. On the bridge of the Eternal Resolve, Admiral Kara Holt stood firm. The deck shook with each blast, but her voice remained steady. "Push forward," she commanded. "Do not give them space to breathe." Her crew obeyed without hesitation. Their eyes carried the same fire as their admiral. They were not fighting for glory, nor for conquest. They were fighting for their people, for the children of Helios III, for every voice silenced by Threx cruelty. Each ship in the human fleet carried that same weight. Every captain, every pilot, every soldier fought with grief sharpened into strength. The Threx began to retreat, but even in retreat they suffered. Their formations crumbled under the relentless human assault. Destroyers were split apart by missile swarms. Cruisers were gutted by railgun fire. Fighters were torn out of the skies by human swarms that seemed endless. On Threx comms, fear filled every voice. "They don't stop," one captain cried before his ship vanished in flames. "They fight like machines." The transmission cut off with a burst of static. The Dominion, once feared, was bleeding like an animal in a trap. Across the galaxy, empires that had once mocked humanity now watched with wide eyes. Their leaders exchanged nervous glances as they realized a terrifying truth. Humanity's strength was not just in numbers, not just in their ships, but in their refusal to break. An alien scholar spoke in hushed tones to his students as they watched the feeds. "Do you see? This is why humans endure. This is why they rise again and again. They are not fighting to win a battle. They are fighting because they cannot accept defeat. That is their power." The battle raged on, and then came the moment that broke the Threx completely. The human flagship Eternal Resolve charged into the center of the Threx fleet. Its massive cannons thundered, tearing open cruisers and carriers. Fighters swarmed around it like guardians of a beast, and from its bridge Admiral Holt gave the final order: "Drive them back. Let the galaxy see that humanity does not kneel." Her words carried across every human ship, filling every soldier with fire. With one last great push, the human fleet surged forward. Missiles and railguns tore apart the heart of the Threx armada. Ships that had once been symbols of fear exploded into burning debris. The Dominion's commanders gave the only order left to them: retreat. The silence after was heavy. Wreckage drifted in the void, glowing in the light of distant suns. Human ships, scarred and battered, held formation. They had lost many, but they had endured. Cheers erupted across human colonies as the news spread. Survivors of Helios III wept with joy, clutching one another as they realized they were no longer alone. Their people had come for them, and in the hearts of every alien empire watching, awe mixed with fear. Humanity had not only survived, they had broken the unbreakable. The turning tide was complete. The Threx Dominion, once a terror to the galaxy, was now in retreat. And the humans, once mocked as weak and outdated, now stood as a storm that no one could ignore. The war was not over. But from this moment on, the galaxy would never again laugh at humanity. The war was not truly over, but the battle was won. For the first time in centuries, the mighty Threx Dominion had tasted bitter defeat, and it was not at the hands of an ancient empire or a rising superpower. It was at the hands of humanity, the species everyone had once dismissed as backward and fragile. On Earth, bells rang. In colonies across the stars, people poured into streets, shouting and singing. Children waved small flags as tears filled the eyes of their parents. Veterans of older wars sat in silence, proud but humbled, whispering to themselves that the sacrifices had not been in vain. Helios III, the world once crushed under the Dominion's cruelty, became a symbol of rebirth. Survivors who had once believed themselves forgotten now stood beneath human banners again, families reunited, strangers embraced, and in every face there was the same truth: humanity had risen. But beyond human space, the reaction was even more powerful. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Leaders of empires sat in stunned silence as they replayed the battle recordings. They watched obsolete human ships, scarred and ancient, tearing through the Dominion's gleaming fleets. They listened to the cries of Threx captains broken by relentless human fire. They heard Admiral Holt's words, strong and unshaken: "Let the galaxy see that humanity does not kneel." Those words echoed across the chamber. For some, it was inspiring. For others, it was terrifying. A diplomat from the Veari Alliance leaned back, whispering to his aide, "If this is what their old fleet can do, what happens when they build something new?" A merchant prince from the Shara coalition wrung his hands nervously. "We mocked them. We kept them isolated. And now they have shown us their teeth." Even the proudest empires, the ones who had laughed loudest at Earth's weakness, sat in silence. No one dared speak lightly of humans anymore. In the ruins of the Dominion fleet, human rescue ships searched tirelessly for survivors, both human and alien. That too shocked the galaxy. Where other species might have left enemies to die, humans pulled even wounded Threx soldiers from drifting wreckage. Many of those rescued looked at their captors with confusion, unable to understand why mercy was given when none had been shown before. One human medic, as he bound the wounds of a Threx pilot, simply said, "Because that's who we are." Those words spread almost as far as the battle itself. Back aboard the Eternal Resolve, Admiral Kara Holt stood before her crew. The ship was scarred, its decks littered with damage, but its spirit was unbroken. She looked into the faces of her people, exhausted, grieving, but proud. "You fought not for power, but for each other," she told them softly. "You showed the galaxy that humanity endures. We may bend, but we do not break. Today you carried not only weapons, but hope. And hope is stronger than fear." Her words drew no cheers, only silence, deep, emotional silence. Some wept quietly. Others stood straighter, their hearts burning with pride. When news of the victory spread beyond the council chambers, ordinary aliens across the galaxy began to whisper in awe. They spoke of humans not as weaklings or curiosities, but as warriors, as survivors, as protectors. An elder of the Kalari spoke to his grandchildren, pointing to the stars. "Remember this day," he said. "The day the humans unveiled their obsolete fleet and changed everything. They are not to be mocked. They are to be respected." The Threx Dominion, broken and humiliated, retreated to its borders. For the first time, fear filled their worlds, not of another empire, but of the humans they had underestimated. And in the shadow of that fear, something new began to stir across the galaxy: alliances, respect, and cautious admiration. Humanity had been pushed, mocked, and underestimated, yet in their darkest hour they had risen like a storm. Their obsolete fleet had become a legend, their will had become unshakable, and their name had become one the galaxy would never forget. On that day, the galaxy stood in awe, and humanity, scarred but unbroken, stood taller than ever before.